all for joining us here today. I'm excited to be able to tell you guys about some of the wildlife monitoring that I have been a part of at Meewasin for the last little while. As Katie said, yeah, I'm Owen Tillie. I've been with Meewasin for about 4 years now. I originally started as a volunteer actually in 2021. And I think actually I spent an event with Mike to go wrapping the trees for living with the beavers. That's pretty exciting. And then came on to the resource management team in 2022. I'm a professional agrologist here in Saskatoon through the Saskatchewan Institute of Agrologists and a graduate from the University of Saskatchewan College of Agriculture and Bioresources. I grew up in Moose Jaw, originally Treaty 4 territory, the original lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota, and homeland of the Métis. So for those of you that don't know, Meewasin is Cree or Nehiowowan for it is beautiful. The Meewasin Valley is located on Treaty 6 territory, and Meewasin is the contemporary steward of this portion of the South Saskatchewan River. But for millennia, the Meewasin Valley has been stewarded by and been the traditional territory of the Saulteaux, Nakota, Lakota, Dakota, and Cree people, and the homeland of the Métis. And I just want to make sure we acknowledge that as part of Meewasin's efforts towards reconciliation and honoring the vast knowledge held by the traditional caretakers of the land today as we steward it. So today, I'll just be covering a few topics. I'll give a quick refresher in case you missed it in the first two webinars of what Meewasin is, some of the initiatives that we've been a part of in the Saskatoon region, how and who and what we're capturing in our wildlife monitoring in the valley, and the role of community science, how you can get engaged, and a little bit about the Urban Wildlife Information Network. So Meewasin got its start really way back in 1975 when the Department of Municipal Affairs commissioned a study of the Saskatoon riverbank. This led to a meeting in 1977 to explore what was known as the Saskatoon River Edge Project, which brought in architect Raymond Moriyama in 1978. Moriyama and his team came to Saskatoon to survey the river by foot, by canoe, and by plane. And what they found here caused them such excitement that they couldn't sleep easy at night. They were just so excited by the potential that they found here. At the end of their survey here, they crafted what is now the Meewasin Valley Project. This is a 100-year vision of what could be and the foundational document that we use at Meewasin. Moriyama believed that every architect dreamed of designing a cathedral. And to him, this Meewasin Valley Project and this 100-year plan is closer to a cathedral than the cathedral itself. And I think the 2.36 million trail visits last year really testify to that statement. In 1979, the Meewasin Valley Act was passed, and that really just solidified the partnership between the government of Saskatchewan, the city of Saskatoon, and the University of Saskatchewan. If you're interested in reading more about this, you can find a copy on our website, meewasin.com. But where is Meewasin? Well, we're a pretty big place. 75 kilometers of river, starting from just south of Beaver Creek, following 75 kilometers north through the city, ending at about Clark's Crossing. It involves 6,700 hectares of land, or the same as 13,000 Canadian football fields, making us the largest urban conservation zone in Canada. Approximately 60% of all that 6,700 hectares is within city limits of Saskatoon. The other 40% is outside in the arm of Corman Park. Moriyama predicted a population of about 240,000 at the end of the 100-year plan. So 2078, 2079, 240,000 people. 45 years in, at 2025, we have over 266,000 people in Saskatoon. So that puts a lot of pressure on our natural resources and on the wildlife we share those natural resources with. So that leaves us with another quote that I really like from Raymond Moriyama. What kind of legacy do I want to leave for my children and their children? There are at least 50 different species of mammals, amphibians, reptiles that use the Saskatoon area and the Meewasin Valley, and over 200 different bird species. 38 of these species were identified in the Valley-wide Resource Management Plan that I'll talk a little bit about later as conservation concern, species that we really want to work to protect. So the question is, how can we monitor these species and make sure that they have healthy populations? And how can we best conserve the habitat that they require in order to live? Not just, so they can live. We use a variety of monitoring techniques and equipment that I'll talk about in this webinar. And we collaborate with a lot of partners like the City of Saskatoon or Environment and Climate Change Canada to monitor changes in these species and the activity in these natural areas and in the urban landscape. So Meewasin has been collecting data on wildlife since its inception in 1979 in some capacity. A lot of this has been incidental, just observations as we've been conducting other sorts of field work. And I say we, Meewasin, to more involved projects like a monitoring avian productivity and survivorship station at Beaver Creek a number of years ago. And the first camera trap, the first trail camera, was deployed actually out at the Northeast Swale, marking about 20 years of digital data collection. And it's just interesting to know that camera only lasted about 2 weeks before a beaver found it, cut that tree down, and left a little time capsule somewhere out in the Northeast Swale for us. So it'll be interesting whenever we can find that camera. But as Meewasin has matured as an organization, we've required better planning, more planning, and a frameworks in order to guide the work that we do. So then in 2015, Meewasin, alongside the help with the Nature Conservancy of Canada, engaged with over 30 stakeholder groups to develop the Meewasin Valley-wide Resource Management Plan. This resource management plan provides a 10-year vision that identifies key ecological targets and threats to those targets, and includes intervention points in the form of actions for the effective conservation of the Meewasin Valley. One of those actions that was identified was the need for this monitoring framework, something to guide the planning and establishment of monitoring in the valley. So then in 2021, that's where the Meewasin Valley-wide monitoring framework comes in, which outlines the monitoring design planning for this and provides a set of recommendations and target species for our monitoring practices. Both of these documents are founded in guidelines from Conservation Measures Partnerships, an international organization that works to standardize data collection for conservation to allow meaningful conversation between different conservation groups. It really emphasizes this cyclic and adaptive monitoring practice where you regularly evaluate project successes and failures so you can work towards meeting your management goals. And I just have a picture on the screen there of some tree swallow banding that our own Jamie was doing just last year at the Northeast Swale as part of our monitoring. So wildlife monitoring is really, really important. It allows us to answer specific questions or get more general insight into wildlife behavior, how they might be interacting with infrastructure like roads or fences, what species are present on a site, so on and so forth. And I think I've been using kind of survey and monitoring through this, and I just want to make sure I clear that up before we get too carried away. So surveying is sort of like a preliminary investigation. We can have a hunch, a suspicion, an informed guess that there might be a target species at a site that we want to confirm. So the picture here on the screen on the left is a survey that we did at Wilson Island just last year for northern leopard frogs. We knew that there was northern leopard frogs in the area. We could tell from aerial footage that there was a wetland here that could support northern leopard frogs, but we hadn't been to Wilson Island for a number of years, and we just weren't sure if there actually was. So we went out, we took the canoes, we paddled over, and we walked through Wilson Island, and lo and behold, there was northern leopard frog. So that's a really great example of what a survey is. And surveys can then lead into monitoring. Monitoring is a standardized long-term data collection that allows for year-to-year comparison and allows the answering of specific research questions. So this monitoring avian productivity and survivorship program that I mentioned earlier, there was a station out at Beaver Creek from 2008 to 2015 where researchers and Meewasin staff were able to capture birds using mist nets and using those captured birds to sex them, age them, identify them, and assess their body condition and breeding status before being banded and released. MAPS is an international bird banding and avian conservation program that assists in this conservation of bird populations and habitat. And all of this data collected allows for year-over-year monitoring of bird populations and could capture species decline or increases. So those are both a great example, though, too, of active monitoring. They require a lot of people power, a lot of boots on the ground work to do. But Meewasin is not a vast, great, big organization. We only have 25 to 30 people at any time. And we can only make it to so many sites and do so much surveying or monitoring on our own. So we rely on using other equipment like trail cameras or specialized microphones that we can deploy out into the field to collect data autonomously that we then review at a later date. And they're great. Their only real limitation is storage and power. And if we could solve both of those, they could record data 24/7, 365, leaving us with lots to sift through. So I have bioacoustic monitoring up first. That's just a kind of fancy way of saying noise-making animal monitoring. We do a couple different things, mainly targeting birds during their migration, northern leopard frogs, and bat species. So bird monitoring, you can kind of see on the left there, that's one of those are our summer students from last year out for a breeding bird count survey, wherein we wake up well before dawn so we can make it to site for dawn and begin walking predetermined paths, stopping at predetermined locations, like those permanent monitoring posts, to listen and observe all of the bird species that we can identify. We do this during the spring migration, so from about mid-May to mid-July, and that just gives us the most accurate count of bird species and presence on our sites. Outside of that window from mid-May to mid-July, there's just calling less frequently, and we just don't get as accurate of observations or accurate counts. We'll also do bat surveys. They're kind of similar in that we follow paths and make stops to record things, but that's about where the similarities end. As you might already know, bats come out at night, so we go out about an hour before sunset to start observing the horizon to see if we can't see bats moving from their roosting locations, moving over to where they're going to be foraging. I haven't had great success with that quite yet, but I'm hopeful this year that I'll get something. 30 minutes to an hour after sunset, we go out with these special recorders that we use to actually be able to capture bat sound. You might already know, again, that bats are calling in this ultrasonic frequency, and we can't hear that with our own ears. So we use these little devices, and we can plug them into our phone, and then they'll capture the bat noise and translate it into a way that we can actually hear it. At this very moment, there's not a lot of data collected about bats in Saskatchewan or in Saskatoon. We're not totally aware of the full extent of bats in Saskatoon, where they're roosting every night, where they're foraging every night, and how they're moving between these two spaces. And there's even still some questions where some hibernating bats are hibernating in Saskatchewan. So it's a really exciting time to be a part of this kind of research. Everything that I collect is just giving me more questions and more insight into the bat world. And I also want to give a big shout out to everybody at the Jeffrey Lane's lab at the University of Saskatchewan for helping me out getting started and understanding what it is that I'm seeing. But you can imagine getting up early, getting up very late is not always easy, and we have all these other projects that we need to take part in. So that's where this passive monitoring comes in. And these microphones that we use, autonomous recording units, or ARUs, they're great little devices that can non-invasively capture all of the sound making animals in an area. Meewasin uses 9 total ARUs. 8 of these are set up to capture birds, frogs, you and I, everything kind of in this, quote, normal range of sound. And we have 1 that will capture bats, so everything above 20,000 kilohertz. Those 8 normal recorders, they're set to record noise-making animals from 2 hours around sunrise, 2 hours around sunset. So 4 hours a day, 8 recorders, that's 32 recorders, 32 hours rather, every day for about 2 months, giving us about 2,000 hours of acoustic data that needs to be sifted through and annotated to draw meaningful insight from. And just for a frame of reference, that's the same as about 260 working days, which is 10 more days than there is working days in a calendar year. So that's a lot of data to have to sift through. I have on the screen here just 2 sample recordings. Unfortunately, I couldn't figure out how to make them play back for you, so I'll just talk about them. On the top here is a bat call from, I think this was Beaver Creek. You can see just a kind of a variation in the calls, and you can see too, there might actually be a second bat in there, but talk about it. So this first little segment here is a search phase call. The big brown bat is just flying through the neighborhood looking for a moth or a beetle or something. And then as time goes on, it starts to speed up. It's targeted a beetle or a moth or something. And then this very last little phrase, it's calling hundreds of times a second as it's coming in to capture this moth or this beetle, and has a nice little midnight lunch. And then on the bottom here is just another sonogram, just a visual depiction of sound of some bird calls out at Maple Grove from 2022. So this first box is a western meadowlark. And then right beside it there, I know it's a little faint, but the next one is a house wren. And then up top there is a clay-colored sparrow. So it's interesting to see just kind of the diversity and the changes, or the different ways that animals are calling in the environment, and how we can use that to draw conclusions and guide the conservation work that we do. These ARUs are great. They really are. They allow us to sample multiple sites at once at the same time, which can allow us to compare different sites or different habitat types, or just kind of the spatial diversity of birds across the site. They and could even compare between things like road noise and bird communities there versus bird communities in areas that are less affected by bird noise. What I'm excited to do this year with the ARUs is to deploy them in different burn frequencies, as Meewasin conducts prescribed burns as part of our conservation work and wildfire management. And so we have kind of this heterogeneous or mosaic of burn patches on the landscape. So I'm really looking forward this year to deploy these ARUs in different burn patches to see how maybe that influences the bird communities that we have. So ranging from things that were burned just last year to years ago to 10 or more years ago. So it'll be interesting to see if there's anything coming from that. Probably would need year over year data collection, but maybe this is the start. And moving on to more of this wildlife instead of birds and bats, we use camera traps primarily. There are ways to actively monitor for wildlife. We do also a few volunteer events every year on wildlife tracking or fur sampling along fence lines. We can go out and walk fence lines to see where the animals, or maybe the deer or the antelope, are crossing into or out of our sites. But we primarily use these camera traps or trail cameras. They also allow us to non-invasively capture data and see wildlife moving through the site. The map on the left there is of Beaver Creek and just kind of outlines the general format that we use for these camera traps. Those blue circles are permanent monitoring posts. Then they were developed by Dr. Darcy Henderson from the Canadian Wildlife Services for a project out at Grasslands National Park that we've adopted. The posts are randomly distributed across the property, each given a 100-meter buffer for data collection. And this is where we can then mount cameras or those ARUs, those microphones onto to capture data. They're great. They allow us to put things in the grassland, which is notoriously difficult to attach anything to without any trees. And they're also the center point for all of our vegetation transects that we do. You can see some as well, gray spots kind of more along the creek bed there. Those are sort of ad hoc observation points. We put them out for a short-term deployment for the Beaver Creek baseline inventory that came afterwards. Yeah, so that's the wrong date there. That should be 2022. And targeting specific features. So like game trails or burrows or dens, that's what they're for. Short-term deployments, 3 months to a year generally, targeting a thing. For the most part, all of our trail cameras are deployed meter and a half off the ground, and taking 3-round burst of photos. Every so often, we're lucky and we can catch a bird on there. It's just always exciting. It seems like something we shouldn't be able to see just hovering around. There's at least 50 cameras deployed throughout the Meewasin Valley, targeting those features used by wildlife. We don't keep any of the photos of people. We don't need them, but it's always exciting. Sometimes someone finds a camera and sings or plays their trombone for me, so it's kind of fun to see. These next few slides are just to kind of showcase everything that we can see. So I think we got a fox there at Cranberry Flats in the top right, and then moose out at Beaver Creek. That bottom left is, I think it's a northern harrier. I'm not much of a bird guy, but I'm pretty sure that's a northern harrier. And up top, this one's kind of a funny story too. We thought along this fence line, this had a badger den. It was a nice big hole, kind of D-shaped. It made sense. It would have been exciting if it was a badger. So we set up a camera. I took pictures all year or all summer. And then when I finally got the chance to look at it, all I got to see were 13 lined ground squirrels. I don't know why they had such a big hole or what happened there, but it was a little bit of a letdown, but we get these nice shots out of it. We can also see how wildlife is moving through a site. So on the screen here is Peggy McKercher Conservation Area. We're facing towards the river, west. So it's the north is to our right and south to our left. Peggy McKercher is on the north end of town, well within city limits, just south of McCormick Drive. And on screen here is just kind of a progression of deer moving through the site. Let me just pull up the, yeah. So you can see there's two, maybe a third deer kind of tucked away in the background. I did take some of the photos out of the sequence just for brevity. So there's 2, 3 deer moving through the site, and you can just kind of catch the back end of that first one that we saw. A few more on the screen. I counted 5 when I was going through this. A couple more still pass up coming out of the bushes. A little collision there, a collision rather. A couple more coming out of the bushes before they start to move out of the bushes. And when I was actually going through this for this presentation, I noticed another one just lurking in the background there, and really wanted to highlight that for you guys. But I think this just really emphasizes that we're sharing these spaces with wildlife. This is in city limits. This is, you can see people's houses just across the river. And we're sharing them. They're moving through this site. So that's 12 or so white-tailed deer using this area just to pass through deeper even into the city limits. This use of camera traps also lets us see how things change, how the seasons change, how animals adapt to this change, how these cycles are manifesting. This is the study of phenology, or the study of change. So we can monitor things like this coyote. We'll just pretend for a moment this is all Beaver Creek, but this is over a few years and 2 different camera locations. But if we just pretend for a moment that this is the same coyote at the same spot, we can see in February it's looking healthy. It's got a full winter coat. It's survived. It's thriving even, and we can tell why. In March there, it's caught something. I don't know what it is. Lunch. And it's doing great. It's surviving through the landscape, thriving through the landscape. And then come May, it's shedding its winter coat and getting ready for the summer season. And having this information and this insight into how the animals are adapting to change, or we have this snapshot of time before municipal development or something. We can see how wildlife changes and how they interact with the landscape alongside us. The first step, though, in any of that is to analyze the data. 2,000 hours of audio recordings, over 5,000 images taken per camera deployment. It's a lot to go through. There are some technology, some software out there that can speed this process along that I'll talk about. On the left here is just kind of is the annotation screen from a piece of software called Kaleidoscope. It processes those acoustic recordings and creates these visual representations of data that allow me to see sound, essentially. This bottom portion is a sonogram. That's a visual representation of sound. And this top portion is the spectrogram, or just the intensity of that noise. And then I can type in, oh, this is a clay-colored sparrow, or this is a silver-haired bat. On the right is Wildlife Insights. That's a piece of software that I've been using to go through camera trap data. It leverages computer vision and machine learning to identify objects in the screen, which is great. What I really like about it is that it takes out a lot of the empty images and allows me to have this nice annotation screen right on the same page to put the species of the animal, sex, relative age, any markings and any other notes. Before, I had to go through a separate image viewer and Excel spreadsheet and move back and forth, and it just wasn't great. But we use all of this data, and I must have accidentally taken off the picture I wanted. But this then informs our baseline inventories, which are a snapshot in time of a particular site. So right now, just in the works is the Beaver Creek Conservation Area baseline inventory, which will showcase all of the information that we've been able to collect up until this very moment at Beaver Creek. And this is then used in the rest of Meewasin's master planning process. So our 10-year resource management plans and the ultimate master plan for a site that outlines the ultimate goals and dreams that we have for a site. So all the data that we collect is used into that and guiding our conservation work. And this is just showing a little bit of the graphs and tables that I've been able to generate with all of this. So you can see at the bottom right there, we just happened to get a lot of white-tailed deer, over 4,600 images of white-tailed deer, and then lesser amounts of mule deer, coyotes. I've seen at least one porcupine in the cameras. And then this is a total summary on the left here of just the camera deployments. Up top, and I'm sorry for the abbreviations up here, is just all of the bat calls that were automatically identified through Kaleidoscope that we captured. So this EPT FUS is big brown bats. We get a lot of those. Alaskan hoary bats. One of our biggest bats, actually, 30 grams, incredible stuff. And then silver-haired bats. And here is that master planning process. So data collection and inventory feeding into that baseline inventory of the cultural and environmental and heritage assets that feed into the resource management plan and site master plan. Goes through various stakeholder engagements with our partners, landowners, indigenous groups before something is finalized and complete. So that's what Meewasin does. It's a lot of work, but we can also have folks like you join the party using community science. We use a lot of different outlets for that. eBird and iNaturalist is what I'm most familiar with, but we will use things like eTick or IceWatch to gather more information, crowdsource that information from the public, and help to conserve and gain more information in our valley. There's tons of ways to get involved. You can email myself or Katie if you're interested. It takes as much time or as little time as you want, and I think it's really great for you guys to get involved, or the community to get involved as well, to help. It helps you feel more connected with your environment, observe things in your environment, and helps us here. Also on screen there, we have a new initiative. These little photo stations. This one here is at Beaver Creek. There's another one out at Devil's Dip by the university there, where we have these little stands that you can slide your phone into and take a picture and send that to Meewasin. And they're there to help show us the changes in the landscape, like that phenology I was talking about, that science of change of beavers in the landscape, how beaver dams or beaver foraging changes the complexity and the structure of the landscape. And here at Beaver Creek, we can see the changes even to the water flow. So left to right, top left is of spring, lots of water flow. Moving into summer, lessens. Autumn on the bottom left, still the same. And then iced over in the winter. No beavers yet there. They must have moved, but another exciting thing on the horizon is the Urban Wildlife Information Network. This is an international science endeavor to conduct the science needed to ensure that humans and wildlife can coexist in urban areas. This UN, Urban Wildlife Information Network, was originally started in 2017 as an initiative from the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago, and it has since evolved from there. Saskatoon got established its UN project in 2020, making it the first Canadian partner to join. In 2020, Katie Harris, under the supervision of Dr. Ryan Brook and the enthusiastic support of Wild About Saskatoon and Candace Savage, deployed and implemented this camera network as part of her master's, which rolled into her PhD at the University of Saskatchewan. She's since defended her PhD, and now this camera network is rolling into a community initiative with the help of the partners at the bottom. So the City of Saskatoon, Native Plant Society, Meewasin, Saskatoon Nature Society, Forestry Farm, University of Saskatchewan, and Wild About Saskatoon to continue monitoring and upkeep this network so we can gather the information required to know what the wildlife is doing. And you can see on the map here, this is the general distribution of the cameras, ranging from the city center out into the north, east, southwest corners of the city. That's really all I have for you today. I hope I was able to give you some insight into what Meewasin is doing in wildlife monitoring in the Meewasin Valley. And if you have any questions or you want to get involved with anything like that UN project, we need volunteers to help check cameras, update SD cards, or annotate images. So if anything sounds interesting to you or you want to just chat more, I got my email on the screen there. And if you have any questions you want answered right now, I'd be more than happy to answer them. So I guess we can open it up, Katie.